It's early 2023 in Lake Forest, Chicago, an upscale neighborhood with beautiful, spacious homes and carefully kept lawns. This is a place where everything looks perfect on the outside. But behind the doors of one of these grand houses lives a lonely widow, hidden away from the world. Margaret is 65 and lives alone in a large, elegant home. Once a respected art gallery owner, Margaret now lives a quiet life after the loss of her husband. Although she has everything she could ever want, wealth, art, and comfort, she feels deeply lonely. Since her husband's death, she's withdrawn from social life, filling her days with simple routines, charity work, and memories of the past. She misses companionship and love, but hasn't been able to find either since her husband's passing. Derek is 28, young, handsome, and knows exactly how to use his charm. He's known among his friends as someone who targets wealthy, older women, charming them with his good looks and smooth talk. Though he looks successful, Derek has no stable job and is constantly looking for wealthy partners to support his expensive tastes. He sees relationships as a way to get what he wants, and Margaret becomes his next target. It's a Friday evening, and Margaret, feeling nostalgic, decides to attend a high-end art gallery event in downtown Chicago. She hasn't been to a social gathering in years, but hopes to reconnect with old acquaintances and perhaps relive her days as a gallery owner. The gallery is filled with refined guests, soft classical music, and dim, warm lighting. As she admires a painting, Derek accidentally bumps into her, spilling a little of his drink in the process. He's charming and apologetic, instantly disarming her with his friendly smile. He quickly takes an interest in the painting she's viewing, pretending to appreciate the art. He impresses her with his politeness, and they start chatting. Within minutes, Derek senses Margaret's vulnerability and realizes she might be exactly the kind of wealthy woman he's been looking for. By the end of the evening, he's made an impression on Margaret, who is flattered by the attention of such a young, attractive man. Over the next few weeks, Derek begins calling Margaret regularly, inviting her out to coffee, dinners, and art events. He showers her with compliments, telling her she's beautiful, refined, and unlike any other woman he's ever met. Margaret, unused to such attention since her husband's passing, is captivated. Derek's flattery and attentiveness awaken feelings of excitement and happiness she hasn't felt in years. The age difference between them is obvious, and Margaret initially worries about how it might look to others. But Derek reassures her, telling her that age is meaningless to him and that he's drawn to her sophistication and warmth. Margaret, flattered and touched, begins to fall for him, believing he genuinely cares for her. Derek, meanwhile, continues to play his part, becoming more affectionate and attentive each time they meet. His flattery and charm feel genuine to Margaret, and her initial hesitations fade away. Soon, she is convinced that Derek brings a new spark into her life, making her feel young and vibrant once again. As their relationship deepens, Derek subtly encourages Margaret to make small changes. He suggests she treat herself to some new clothes and jewelry, emphasizing that she deserves to feel beautiful and appreciated. Eager to please him and enjoy this newfound sense of youth, Margaret begins spending on herself in ways she hadn't for years. Derek's influence grows, and soon Margaret is treating him to dinners at exclusive restaurants and buying him gifts he claims he never experienced before. At his urging, she even helps him secure a luxurious apartment in a nearby building, covering the initial rent as a loan he promises to repay. Friends and family notice a visible change in Margaret. She dresses more stylishly, wearing vibrant clothes and new accessories. She appears more youthful and excited, with a new sparkle in her eye. Although some express concern about her sudden spending habits and Derek's influence, she brushes them off, convinced that this relationship is making her truly happy. As the months pass, Margaret's adult children, Emma and Thomas, begin to notice significant changes in their mother. Emma, in her early 40s, is a busy attorney who prides herself on being close to her mother. Thomas, a 39-year-old tech entrepreneur, has always looked out for his mother's well-being. They are both concerned about how quickly Margaret has become involved with Derek. During a family dinner, they observe Margaret's new habits, her extravagant spending, her late nights out with Derek, and the noticeable shift in her personality. While she used to be reserved and thoughtful, she now seems overly eager to impress Derek and often brushes off their concerns with a wave of her hand. Emma decides it's time to confront her mother. She and Thomas sit down with Margaret one afternoon, expressing their worries. "Mom, we're really concerned about you," Emma begins gently. "We've noticed you've changed a lot lately, and we just want to make sure you're okay. Who is this Derek guy? What do you really know about him?" Margaret, feeling defensive and angry, immediately accuses them of being jealous of her happiness. "You two don't understand. He makes me feel alive again. You're just looking out for yourselves and don't want to see me happy." Thomas tries to reason with her, but she shuts him down, insisting they are being disrespectful and ungrateful. The confrontation leaves Emma and Thomas frustrated and worried, unsure of how to reach their mother without pushing her further away. Meanwhile, Derek is aware of the growing concern for Margaret's children and uses it to his advantage. He begins to subtly isolate her from her family and friends, planting seeds of doubt about their intentions. "They don't really care about you, Margaret," he tells her. "They just want your money. They've always been after your inheritance." With each conversation, Derek positions himself as Margaret's only true ally, convincing her that he understands her in ways her children cannot. "Your kids don't know what it's like to feel alone. They just want to keep you wrapped up in their world and away from happiness," he asserts. "They don't appreciate the joy you deserve at this stage in your life." Derek encourages Margaret to limit her time with Emma and Thomas, suggesting that they don't understand her desire for happiness and the excitement he brings into her life. "If they really loved you, they would support you and your choices," he says, manipulating her emotions to deepen her reliance on him. Over time, Margaret grows more distant from her children, believing their concern is merely jealousy and misunderstanding. Derek also persuades Margaret to stop inviting friends over for social gatherings, claiming that they are judgmental and do not appreciate her new lifestyle. This isolation allows Derek to gain more control over Margaret, creating an environment where he can manipulate her without outside influence. Margaret, feeling torn but increasingly devoted to Derek, begins to shut out the very people who care about her the most. As their relationship progresses, Derek becomes increasingly comfortable in his role as Margaret's partner. He begins to drop hints about wanting to start a business, a venture he claims will allow them both to enjoy even more lavish lifestyles. Initially, Margaret is supportive, eager to encourage Derek's ambitions and show her commitment to their future together. However, as time goes on, his demands grow. Derek starts asking for larger sums of money, explaining that he needs capital to get his business off the ground. He paints a picture of a successful future where they will be partners, not just in love, but in business as well. With each request, he becomes more persuasive, insisting that their investment together will pay off. Margaret, blinded by her affection for him, begins to overlook the growing amount of money she is withdrawing from her accounts. Feeling that this is a necessary step for both of them, she starts making large withdrawals, convincing herself that her financial support is an expression of her love. She even discusses the idea of purchasing a property together, believing it symbolizes their commitment. Derek encourages this idea, further enticing her with dreams of a shared life filled with luxury and success. Despite her initial excitement, Margaret begins to feel uneasy as Derek's demands escalate. One evening, while they are spending time together, she accidentally catches a glimpse of Derek's phone. A message flashes across the screen, showing a flirty exchange with a younger woman. Margaret's heart races as she feels a wave of unease wash over her. Curious and suspicious, she discreetly begins to investigate. She finds Derek's phone left unattended one afternoon and decides to take a look. Going through his messages and social media accounts, she uncovers a web of deceit, multiple conversations with younger women, all filled with flattery and flirtation. Margaret's mind races as she connects the dots. Derek has been using her money to finance a lifestyle filled with expensive dinners, lavish gifts, and outings with these other women. It dawns on her that he has been living a double life, all while feeding her dreams of their future together. Devastated and humiliated by what she has discovered, Margaret feels her world crumbling. The realization that Derek has been deceiving her all along is overwhelming. Anger and heartbreak collide as she confronts Derek, demanding the truth about his actions. When confronted, Derek's demeanor shifts. Instead of taking responsibility, he tries to gaslight Margaret, making her feel as if she's misunderstood everything. He manipulates her emotions, claiming that she is paranoid and imagining things. With an air of false innocence, he insists that the messages are harmless and merely friendly conversations. He even goes so far as to blame her for not trusting him, twisting the narrative to make it seem like she is the one in the wrong. Derek's tactics confuse Margaret, leaving her feeling guilty for doubting him. However, deep down, she knows the truth and realizes how deeply he has exploited her vulnerability. Confrontation marks a turning point in their relationship, igniting a battle between love and betrayal, as Margaret struggles to reclaim her sense of self and protect her heart from further harm. As the months go by, Margaret begins to notice cracks in the facade of her relationship with Derek. Despite his initial charm and affection, his behavior gradually shifts. He becomes more demanding, often expecting lavish gifts and extravagant nights out. While Margaret once found joy in treating him, she starts to feel the weight of his expectations. The expensive dinners, designer clothes, and gifts accumulate, leaving her bank account significantly depleted. One evening, while flipping through her credit card statements, Margaret stumbles upon an unsettling realization. The bills are far higher than she had anticipated, and many of the charges are for things she never agreed to purchase. A sense of betrayal washes over her as she starts to piece together the true nature of their relationship. The dinners Derek claimed to pay for were often followed by charges on her card, and gifts he insisted were just a token turned into expensive obligations. As she reflects on the time spent together, Margaret recalls moments when Derek seemed more interested in her possessions than her as a person. Conversations that once felt intimate are now tainted with the realization that she was nothing more than a source of wealth to him. The affection that once felt genuine is now overshadowed by feelings of humiliation and anger. It becomes painfully clear to Margaret that Derek never truly loved her. He only loved the lifestyle she provided. The thought that a man nearly half her age could manipulate her feelings for financial gain sends her into a spiral of self-doubt and fury. Unable to contain her emotions, Margaret decides to confront Derek about her suspicions. She invites him over for what she plans to be a calm discussion, but the atmosphere in her luxurious home is tense from the start. As soon as Derek walks in, Margaret can sense his dismissive attitude, and her heart races with a mixture of fear and resolve. When she brings up her concerns about the spending and his intentions, Derek's demeanor shifts from charming to defensive. He attempts to downplay her fears, insisting that she's overreacting and that he truly cares for her. But as the conversation escalates, so do their tempers. Margaret's heart pounds as the pain of betrayal surges through her. She feels herself becoming increasingly overwhelmed by anger and betrayal. Accusations fly between them. "You never loved me," Margaret cries, her voice trembling with hurt. "You used me for my money." Derek, in turn, denies everything, claiming that she's imagining things and trying to push him away. As they argue, the walls of her home, once a sanctuary filled with beautiful art, feel like they are closing in on her. In a moment of raw emotion, Margaret loses control. "You're nothing but a gold digger," she shouts, tears streaming down her face as she confronts the reality of her situation. Derek, realizing that his deception is unraveling, snaps back, his charm replaced by anger. "You were just an easy target," he retorts, further fueling the fire of Margaret's fury. The air is thick with tension as Margaret stands her ground, her heart racing. She feels both heartbroken and enraged, the weight of her humiliation and anger threatening to consume her. This confrontation becomes the breaking point in their relationship, where Margaret's dreams of love and companionship crumble into the harsh reality of betrayal. In that heated moment, the truth of Derek's intentions is laid bare, and the consequences of his manipulation begin to loom large, hinting at the tragic fallout that is about to unfold. The tension between Margaret and Derek reaches a breaking point one evening after a lavish dinner at a high-end restaurant. Derek, emboldened by his ongoing manipulation, has begun to make demands that Margaret finds unsettling. He asks for a significant sum of money for a supposed investment opportunity, insisting it would benefit both of them. Margaret, feeling the weight of his expectations and sensing his increasing greed, refuses, explaining that she is not comfortable risking her finances any further. Derek, feeling cornered, becomes aggressive, accusing Margaret of being selfish and untrusting. The atmosphere quickly shifts from romantic to hostile as they argue in the dimly lit living room of her home, where the echoes of their earlier laughter now hang heavily in the air. In a fit of rage, Derek raises his voice, calling her old and worthless, and questioning why she has not been more generous with her wealth. Margaret's heart races, and she feels a mix of fear and betrayal. This is not the man she thought she knew. As his words cut deeper, her anger ignites, and in a moment of passion, she reaches for a decorative letter opener from the table, a piece of art in her home, and plunges it into Derek's side. The room falls silent as Derek's eyes widen in shock, and he collapses to the floor, blood pooling around him. Margaret stands frozen, horror etched across her face as she realizes the gravity of what she has done. In the moments following the fatal altercation, panic sets in. Margaret stares at Derek's lifeless body, her mind racing as she grapples with disbelief and fear. "What have I done?" echoes in her thoughts. Driven by instinct, she knows she must act quickly. She attempts to compose herself, frantically cleaning up the scene and trying to stage it as an accident. Margaret wipes the blood from the letter opener and places it back on the table, desperate to erase any signs of the confrontation. She rearranges furniture and tries to make it appear as if Derek had fallen accidentally during a heated discussion, believing that a carefully crafted narrative will protect her. Yet, her hands tremble, and the frantic nature of her actions creates more mess than clarity. In her attempt to stage the scene, Margaret struggles to maintain consistency in her story. She finds herself forgetting crucial details and losing her composure, revealing her emotional state through her hurried movements. The fear of being discovered overwhelms her, and as she looks down at Derek's still body, the realization of the gravity of her crime sinks in deeper. As she sits next to him, tears streaming down her face. The weight of her actions crashes over her. In a last-ditch effort to cover her tracks, she cleans the apartment meticulously, yet her anxiety only deepens as she becomes increasingly aware of how thin her facade is. She knows that someone will eventually come looking for Derek, and she is terrified of what that will mean for her. It begins when Derek's friends and family report him missing after several days without contact. They become increasingly worried when he fails to show up for a planned trip and doesn't respond to calls or messages. Knowing his habits, they instinctively reach out to those in his life, including Margaret, who has become an important figure in his recent activities. When police arrive to investigate, they discover that Derek's last known communication was with Margaret. This immediately raises suspicions. Detective Sarah Thompson, an experienced investigator, leads the case and begins by interviewing Margaret in her lavish home. Margaret, still reeling from the events, is cooperative but visibly shaken. She tries to present a composed front but struggles to mask her anxiety and fear. As the investigation unfolds, Detective Thompson digs deeper into Derek's life and his relationship with Margaret. Friends and family of Derek come forward, sharing their concerns about his recent behavior. They reveal that Derek had a history of targeting wealthy women, detailing his charm, but also his manipulative tendencies. They speak of how he'd boast about his conquests and his methods of financially exploiting older women, painting a stark picture of a man who was less a partner and more a predator. Meanwhile, detectives uncover financial records revealing the extent of Margaret's spending on Derek's lavish gifts, expensive dinners, and the apartment rent that she had covered. They begin to piece together a timeline of Derek's activities, leading up to his disappearance, linking his increasing financial dependence on Margaret to his eventual vanishing. This evidence, combined with testimonies about his questionable character, starts painting a troubling narrative about the nature of their relationship. Margaret's friends, concerned for her well-being, also share their observations of her transformation. They testify about the changes they noticed in her spending habits and how she seemed to lose herself in Derek's charm. This further deepens the detective's suspicions regarding Margaret's role in Derek's disappearance. Overwhelmed by guilt and the weight of the evidence against her, Margaret finds herself cornered. After a long night of questioning, Detective Thompson presents her with the information gathered so far, the financial records, testimonies from Derek's friends, and the timeline of events. Faced with the reality of the situation, Margaret's emotional facade begins to crack. In a moment of vulnerability, she breaks down and confesses to the detectives. With tears streaming down her face, Margaret recounts her relationship with Derek, expressing how she had been manipulated and betrayed by a man she had genuinely cared for. She describes the thrill of being in love, the excitement he brought into her life, and how that excitement turned to despair as she realized Derek was only after her wealth. As she talks, Margaret reveals the events leading up to the confrontation that ended Derek's life. She explains how, in a fit of rage during an argument about his increasingly demanding financial requests, she acted impulsively. The rage she felt at being used and betrayed boiled over, leading to a tragic, fatal encounter. She expresses remorse for her actions and for the life that was lost, revealing a woman who had been driven to desperation by loneliness and manipulation. Margaret's confession is filled with a mix of sorrow and acceptance of her fate. She understands the gravity of her actions and the pain she has caused, not just to Derek's family, but also to herself. The detectives listen intently, knowing they have uncovered a story of love, betrayal, and tragic consequences that will forever change the lives of all involved. After the shocking events surrounding Derek's murder, the case draws significant media attention, captivating the public with its dramatic twists. As the investigation unfolds, it becomes clear that while Derek manipulated Margaret for his own gain, the consequences of his actions have been devastating. Margaret is charged with his murder, leading to a highly publicized trial that sparks debates about age, manipulation, and the complexities of love. During the trial, the prosecution presents evidence of Derek's deceitful behavior and the emotional turmoil he caused Margaret. They argue that his charm and lies pushed her to a breaking point, while the defense highlights Margaret's advanced age and the psychological impact of losing her husband. They plead for leniency, painting Margaret as a vulnerable woman who was taken advantage of rather than a cold-blooded killer. Ultimately, the jury reaches a verdict, finding her guilty but with significant consideration for her circumstances. The judge sentences her to a minimum security facility, taking into account her age, mental state, and Derek's manipulation as mitigating factors. In the quiet of her new surroundings, Margaret grapples with the reality of her situation, reflecting on the choices that led her here. She spends her days contemplating the tragic turn her life has taken and the lessons she failed to heed. The aftermath of the trial leaves Margaret's family shattered. They are thrust into the spotlight, dealing with the fallout of the tragedy and the stigma attached to their mother's actions. Family members feel a mixture of anger, sadness, and embarrassment, leading to a deep sense of distance. Margaret's children, who had once looked up to her as a strong matriarch, now struggle to reconcile the loving mother they knew with the woman who became involved in such a scandalous affair. They retreat from public life, feeling overwhelmed by the scrutiny of the media and the community. Friends who once supported the family now whisper behind their backs, further isolating them in their grief. As they navigate this painful journey, Margaret's family holds tightly to one another, trying to heal and understand the tragedy that has unfolded. They grapple with feelings of betrayal, not just towards Margaret, but also towards Derek, whose manipulation they can now see clearly. The story concludes with a cautionary message, highlighting the vulnerabilities that come with love and trust. It emphasizes the dangers of manipulation and how easily one can be led astray by charm and deceit. Margaret's experience serves as a reminder that even the wealthiest and seemingly strongest individuals can fall victim to exploitation, particularly when they are emotionally vulnerable. In her reflections, Margaret recognizes that her loneliness and desire for connection blinded her to the red flags Derek presented. Her tragic choices serve as a warning to others about the importance of being aware of one's vulnerabilities and the intentions of those who enter their lives. The legacy of this story is not only a tale of betrayal, but also a poignant reminder to seek genuine connections and to be wary of those who might exploit one's emotional needs. It leaves readers with a profound sense of the complexities of love and the tragic outcomes that can arise from misplaced trust, urging them to approach relationships with both open hearts and cautious minds.